are listening to the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast, and I appreciate you doing so. You can find every episode of the podcast and more content at dsmsports.net. You can find me, your host, Neil Horwitz, on Twitter, NJH287, also on LinkedIn, where I post more content. And of course, you can subscribe, follow along to the podcast on whichever podcast platform is your favorite. Really cool show for you guys today. I've been following this guy for a while and his company. My guest on the podcast today is Michael Gold. He is co-founder of Future Fans, and what they do is they help to educate the fans of tomorrow, specifically with a couple of products that help to educate young kids about the rules of sports so they can become fans of the sport, watch alongside with mom and dad or their friends or their brothers, sisters, etc. You may think back to when you were a kid and how you first picked up the rules of the sport, especially a more nuanced sport like American football. They also have a product around soccer. They're working on baseball and basketball as well. And it's a really interesting conversation coming up. We talk about what it's like to market to fans and their parents, how teams and leagues are going about it, how Future Fans is going about getting their product out there, and what it takes to teach a kid the rules of the game and how it affects their likelihood, the propensity to become lifelong fans. Truly important stuff. Really interesting conversation. If you're interested in developing the fans of tomorrow, you're going to want to hear this because lots of information here from Michael Gold of Future Fans. Back on the podcast with today's guest, and I'm so psyched to be speaking with him. I am come away so stimulated, so inspired every time we speak. He has a really great story to tell, a really cool product that he has. My guest on the podcast today is Michael Gold. He is the co-founder of Future Fans. Welcome to the podcast today, Michael.
Hey, Neil. Thanks for having me.
Psyched to pick your brain, hear your story. You are really in a cool space right now and helping to educate the fans of tomorrow, which every sports business executive is worried about. The fans of tomorrow, the next generation of fans, especially as this generation, Gen Alpha, Gen Z, they're coming up in much different ways with tons of competition for their time. So we're psyched to learn all about it. But first, tell us your story, man. Tell us your full story, how you got started in your career and how you came upon this idea. And then we'll get more into Future Fans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. From Columbus, Ohio, originally. My undergrad is Michigan, so I've got that unique background. It wouldn't be weird if it weren't for sports. And excited to have that background. My first career was actually as a history professor. Not a lot of people know that, but that was my kind of first foray into figuring out a problem, solving it through research, writing, teaching.
What area? Like American history, European history, history of?
Middle Eastern history.
Okay.
That's a whole different path for another day and another time. And ultimately jumped out of that and kind of took my research skills into my first startup, which was around the analytics and big data space. This was just as kind of big data was being applied, into, large companies and solving different business problems. Big data is a term from the past now, and ultimately grew and exited that company, and then moved into the broader consulting space and spent a lot of time in healthcare, in particular alternative payment models in healthcare. That's a whole nother path that we don't need to hit on today. Through that, had the opportunity to solve a lot of different business problems for a lot of different organizations, but always had, an entrepreneurial interest. And a couple years ago, came upon this idea around what became Future Fans. And the initial spark was, how can we help get our own young kids connected and engaged around sports as a connection, between us and across generations. And, that ultimately turned into the company that we're growing today.
So what does that inspiration spark look like? And when you talk about trying to educate young people on a sport, or kids, I mean, I'm using young people I sound old. Is it like in the end of we want to drive participation, or we want to drive fandom and spectatorship? So I guess take me back to that moment where you're like, this is a problem that we have. No one, and then what are the next steps you take?
Yep. So my business partner, he and I were running a healthcare consulting company at the time, and this was when the Bengals were going on that unexpected run to the Super Bowl a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He was trying to, watch with his then 5-year-old because these were life-changing moments for any Bengals fan, right, who
Mhm.
hadn't won a playoff game in over 3 decades. And despite his, best effort since this daughter was born for 5 years, like just she wouldn't engage. And so, he came to me and said, like, man, this is such an important moment in my life as a Bengals fan, and I really want to share this with my kid because intergenerational connection and kind of sparking those memories and experiences are so
Yeah.
important to sports fans and parents. And he thought like there must be a better way to bring kids into the world of sports. And I quickly reflected on some of my cherished memories growing up with my kids and well, with my parents and grandparents, and then thought about what sports meant to me and my kids, and particularly what sports meant to my kids and their grandparents as well. And I thought, yeah, this is a problem that we need to solve. And so that was the initial spark. And then we went through some diligence to kind of figure out what's the best way to solve it, and is this something that can catch fire in the market.
Love that. And I mean, I can speak from experience. Like I know I'm right now we're in the middle of the postseason for baseball, and I will text my dad about how the Padres are doing. And it's that's and that goes beyond, family, but even with friends as well that you don't talk to outside of sports frames oftentimes. It's a social glue. It's so great to develop those relationships. So that's something I go off on all the time. So I love to hear that background for the story of future fans. So I mean, this is something that as I alluded to earlier, plenty of sports business executives have explored this idea of how do we convert, how do we create new fans of our team, of our sport, and the education element is part of it, but also it's a lot of times a branding play. Like we don't care if they know what's going on in the field necessarily, as long as they want to wear the gear and cheer when something good happens. But I guess I want to get at what are those next steps that you take on what else are people doing to solve this problem? What does that research look like? What did you find? What did you find that people have maybe tried and was working in some ways or not working that failed? And how did you ultimately go from that concept to this is the path that we're gonna take?
Yeah, so our kind of core hypothesis is, the primary ingredient to create long-term fandom, not just wearing the gear, not just paying attention to the mascot, and all those things are fine. But real long-term fandom, requires understanding whatever is going on the field or on the court or on the TV.
Mhm.
And so we took the approach of how can we impart the core concepts, rules of a sport to a young kid, in a way that sticks to them and that they can understand. And then that will create the spark, between parent and child among communities
Yeah.
that will help create long-term fandom. And so that's kind of like the core thesis that, drives us every day. And to your point, that's our perspective. And as a startup, we had the unique opportunity to define our lane and then orient a product and a business around it.
Mhm.
There are teams and leagues out there, and all of them, looking to engage fans in any number of ways, be it at the league level, like novel presentations of the game. You think in the NFL, the Toy Story simulcast, or, their partnership with Nickelodeon and SpongeBob SquarePants. And, the NHL, has a version, MLB has a version. So that's one path that leagues are taking, and then participation is another primary path, right? When you talk to league and
Yeah.
team executives, the first place that people go to is, well, if they play street hockey or if they play NFL flag, then these kids have a much higher likelihood of becoming fans, and getting the whole family engaged. And there's absolutely truth to that. We just think that there is another complementary path, to what leagues and teams are doing, and that's where we focused our time.
Yeah, and I mean the maybe cynical side of me is like I'm sure the DraftKings of the world would want everyone to understand the nuances too, because you can't bet on how many yards someone's gonna have. You don't know how like the downs work and all that and the quarters and all, and so that's a whole other podcast, a whole other side there. But I do want, before we keep going here, I want you to be able to describe like what the actual outcome was, what the product is today, and then we can kind of go into more nuances about it. So tell me, future fans, the brand, and what the actual product is, that is educating these fans of tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. So our mission is to help little kids become big fans, and we try to do that in a fun and easy way. And our mindset is, kids are sponges. They learn so much growing up. How can we impart the rules of a sport to a kid in a way that makes sense to them, right? Because for anybody that has a kid out there, if you say the word down to them, they're going to look down at their shoelaces and like wonder why, they're not connecting with what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
so we decided to take an approach, that speaks to how kids do learn. And we were inspired by a chess product that teaches young kids through stories. And so, our bedrock was, okay, how can we teach through stories, but that are parallel? And so, what the product is, it's a storybook-led experience where a grown-up and child read a storybook, and in that storybook, there are kids that go to a sports summer day camp, but instead of learning the rules directly, they learn through fun camp experiences and games. Okay. And so I'll just give you one example, and then we can, get into other things. But right, so the kids are at football week at this, summer day camp, but instead of learning the rules of downs directly, because it's really hard to teach the rules of downs, the kids play a beanbag toss game. Okay. And they have 4 tries to throw a beanbag into a hoop. If they're successful, they advance and get 4 more tries or another first try. If they get into the last hoop, they get 6 points, and then they get to dance the scratchy bottom hop, which is how everybody celebrates at the summer day camp, right? And then they get to play a 2-player version, against a friend. And so when you get to the 4th try, you learn a rhyme. Can I make it? Should I try? On the 4th, I must decide. Okay. So this is a simple beanbag toss game that, 4, 5, 6-year-olds like to play. They see kids at this sports summer day camp in this storybook playing it. And then that helps them learn the rules of downs in a way that's intuitive. Additionally, along with the storybook, they get an activity box. And in the activity box are surprises that the kids get to open alongside reading the storybook. So, in the example I just gave, you read part of the storybook around playing this beanbag toss game, and then the child is directed to pause and they get to open a surprise that brings to life whatever they just read about, in this case, the circle toss game. And then they get to go play this game, with the parent. And so this does a couple things. One, if you're familiar with education, there's this concept of stacking where a kid, learns through reading, and then it's reinforced through play, singing, dancing, and rhymes. And so in that way, it sticks a little better. And then 2, right, if any kids are anything like mine, they like to get, ice cream or incentives, anything that they can get their hands on as a reward for what they're doing. So in this case, the kid gets to read a chapter, and then they know that they're going to get rewarded with a surprise box. And so that helps, keep them engaged throughout the experience. And so, this is just a couple of examples, but, we have sport specific boxes. Football and soccer are out right now that are, activity boxes, around learning a sport that, a kid as young as 4 can do with a parent. And at the end of a couple weeks, having gone through it, they will have a basic understanding of the rules of the game alongside having gone through this experience with a parent, such that then they have that baseline understanding and knowledge to spark, a real long-term interest in the game. And that's what we're all about.
No, I appreciate the explanation. It sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, I would enjoy doing it myself. And it's interesting too, because I think back, I'm a serial attender of attendee of sports events that I don't know the sport. Like I've been to, rugby matches, and I'm trying to pick up what's going on in those sports. Or, I mean, I've been to professional surfing events or professional volleyball events. I've not yet been to a cricket match, but that's one I want to check out as well. And so, like, we can almost put ourselves in those shoes of like we are trying to learn a foreign sport, and this is a way that you, especially even more difficult, trying to reach that 4 or 5, 6, 7-year-old who is maybe not as receptive to learn new things without it being fun and being tactile and being playful and being reward driven as well.
Yeah, and then you put yourself in those kids' shoes, and like, a lot of fans are yelling at the TV or, screaming about a call. And so you've got just this whole other layer of kind of barriers, confusion, or just like, what is wrong with dad, every Saturday, or mom. And so it's just all these like, kid-friendly access points, into the world of sports, which is, as you said, all about community. It's all about connection. It's all about, creating memories together.
Do you find that there's a bit of that desire on the children's side as well? Like where, yes, I I want to play a game. I'm having fun with this game. I'm gonna keep playing because it's a fun toy. It's a fun game. Is there also like where, yeah, I do want to understand this so I can talk. I can relate to my parents more. I mean, I can relate to my dad, relate to my mom when we're watching the games together. Like, is there part of that psychology as well?
Absolutely. I mean, kids want to do what their, parents do a
Yeah.
lot of the time. And so, and you want to be included in whatever is going on, in the family. And there's no better way to be included than, doing the things that your parents want to do. And again, our interest is not in like forcing kids to adopt the interests of their parents. We
Right.
want to expose it to them and so that they have, the opportunity and then option to like opt in and enjoy it. And I'll just give you one quick anecdote.
Yeah.
We talked to one of our customers at the end of last season, and she got really emotional. And she said, my parents were huge Detroit Lions fans growing up. And she said, I always felt a barrier, because I never actually understood what was going on in the games. And now like that I have the opportunity both to learn a little bit myself, but also make sure that like I have this connection with my own kids and my spouse was really meaningful to her. And like those are the things that really motivate us, inspire us, and keep us going as founders.
Oh yeah, no, that definitely is a really uplifting and inspiring and encouraging for sure. And so like when you are again trying to, I guess, then market this product and trying to reach, I mean, I assume that you the recipient of any sort of marketing and promotion awareness is mostly the parent side. I mean, yes, you can reach kids in some ways, but the parent's going to make the decision to buy that product. So are you like for that woman who wants to connect with the kids, just like she could have or would have with her parents, how are you like telling this, making sure that conveying that this is a problem that exists that you can solve? Like, how what is that messaging like, and how are you what are some of the ways you're trying to get that out there?
Yeah, it's a great question because our product is a bit unique. And so if you said, "Oh, I'm going to teach somebody a sport," like if you don't know what we're doing, you'll think like either you're giving them a ball,
Right.
and they're learning how to throw or kick or whatever, based on your lived experience, or like you're giving them an old Matt Christopher book, and like that dates me a little bit, but like, you're just reading a book about a sport. And so we kind of do neither. And so the messaging is really important for us. And so we want to one lead with the emotion and like the problem. Like, do you wish your kid was more connected around sports, or have you ever had a challenge explaining a rule of a sport to your own kid, and that'll get somebody's attention. And then we kind of quickly walk through our unique kind of genius approach, as we call it, and then kind of pay it off with how it works and what the outcome can be, going through this product. And I'd say, that messaging iteration, is not easy, and we continue to learn. But one interesting thing that we think about is, right, like if you told me before I had kids, like as a big fan of football, that like I would have a problem, teaching my own kid the rules of football, I'd say like, no, I know everything. Like I can certainly teach them. And that's like the challenge with expertise, right? Like you don't know, how difficult it may be for somebody else to understand. And so for us, it's really important to help sports fans realize that despite the fact that they know everything about the sport and can answer any question a kid has, like that's not the same thing as being able to give them, a path to understand the rules of a sport, which are convoluted and not intuitive in a way that a 4 or 5 or 6 year old can actually understand.
Yeah, yeah, and in some ways you're selling the outcome in some capacity. Like the before might look like mom and dad are watching the the game on TV, and the kid is whatever looking at watching another episode of Miss Rachel on the iPad or something like that. I'm clearly I don't have kids, so I don't know. That could be way off. But making sure that you are trying to drive that more familial connection, as opposed to having that more siloed experience, which is becoming more prevalent these days, where kids are doing their own thing, as opposed and opposed to their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. A key driver of this is, kids have their own screens and their own devices and streaming, and like, they're just not the same type of kind of family settings that existed, decades ago. And that's not a judgment. It's just like a description. It's the same thing that exists in my household. And so, any sport fan with young kids today can relate to the story of like, okay, I'm taking my kid to a game, baseball, basketball, football, whatever. And like, I've just spent, $50 and like 3/4 of the game, like at the concession stands. Right. And, some of that's okay, but like you want to enjoy the game together. And that's what we're all about.
And I guess as you think about evolving the brand and even the products as well, like is there a place for a youth driven fan development business, I guess? I mean, certainly we've talked plenty of, and I want to go into a little bit as well with how you guys work with sports teams and leagues and others that are trying to solve this problem in a different manner at least. But like how do you make the decision of we are a product as opposed to maybe like we are a brand that's gonna be building these stories and these opportunities to create more like that ongoing relationship with someone? Is that part of the picture for future fans of how do we not just sell you a product but also continue this mission and maybe drive community, drive people working together, and drive further fostering of this fandom?
Yeah, I think, the hard thing about starting a company is you want to have a grand vision, that you can get to around brand and mission, but you also have to be really narrowly focused on where you start and execute to be successful. And so, our grand vision is to be that go-to brand associated with like bringing kids into the world of sports. Pick your analogy, like Bill Nye the Science Guy, or whatever else, like who's just that person associated with kids in that subject. Where we've narrowly started is in these sports specific activity boxes where we have football and soccer, baseball, hockey, and basketball are in the product development pipeline. But from there, we'll have the IP around how we teach. We'll have the IP around the characters and the camp and the fictional, sports summer day camp and the storybook. And then there are a lot of things that you can do with that from, digital content, be it short form, ways of teaching, longer form, series around, kids and sports.
Yeah.
And so there are any number of ways, both from a physical and, digital aspect that you can grow this brand, from the starting point where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, heck, I'm already like thinking in my head now of you could maybe even use the same IP to teach some basic arithmetic and math as well. Like, hey, they had 8 yards to get for their third try, and they picked up 3. How many do they have now left to get? And it's like you can throw in some of those more basic school level lessons in there as well through the same product. It's interesting to think about.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kind of want to, like, you mentioned IP also, but I'm going to take this in a parallel direction when it comes to creating fans of the sport, but also fans of mom and dad's favorite team, and where that comes into play. I'm sure if you show this to a sports team or a professional sports team executive, they'd be like, "Yes, this is great. Let's also make sure that they are not just fans of football, but they're fans of the Bengals. They're fans of the Raiders." So is like I guess what has been your conversations early on with teams and kind of partnering on helping them develop those fans and where the potential comes into play for that IP infusion of you're not just going to learn the sport, you're going to learn the sport through the eyes of my team's logos.
Sure. And it's a great point. And we initially envisioned our, products as team licensed. We quickly realized that, that was not the right path for a startup out of the gate. The revenue guarantees, the amount of working capital tied up in inventory if you've got all these different SKUs across, different teams and leagues. That said, I think over time, the team specific products, unlock an even more, strong connection between somebody and the team and our product. So, and we see a glide path to getting there, where ideally we start by, let's say in the NFL perspective, like you just have the shield and, all 32 helmets. And then over time you customize each product, within the box to the teams. And so I'd say like, that's our point of view from a company perspective. How are we doing that today? One, in our conversations with teams, across the NFL and MLS where we have our products, teams have different perspectives. Some are very intent on leading with their brand and their helmet and their logo, and others, are more interested in, growing the fan base and don't necessarily need to lead with that. And, and both are fine perspectives. We've tended to be more successful with those, obviously that don't need to lead with their brand. And so, what we've done is created relationships where we have a fit with the team and not customize the product itself, but we've found ways to make what we're doing, feel like we're associated with the team without necessarily having the mark. And I can, get into a little bit more detail about what that looks like.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting mindset or I guess problem to solve because I mean we talk about this all the time especially when I talk to someone from like an MLS club, we will often talk about like are you trying to create more professional soccer fans in the States? Or are you trying to create more MLS fans in the States or fans of your club? And that's not always the same. Like if you create a soccer fan and they care about Liverpool or Arsenal and they don't care about your local team, is that a success? And so that conundrum comes into play, I imagine, and when you are talking about creating fans of tomorrow, and they may not pick your team to follow, or may not even care about your professional team. What have you found? Like, as even just looking at the landscape of how teams, whether you have approached them or talked to them or not, how teams are, I guess, trying to solve this problem, trying to develop fans, trying to reach those kids. I mean, every team has a kids club now. Certainly the mascot comes into play as something that's attractive to kids. We see that happening. The WNBA is trying to be really, really friendly to kids and families. NFL is trying to make their experience more friendly and family friendly, I guess, and not just a bunch of alcohol infused fans at times. So like, I guess give us an idea of that landscape of kids clubs, clinics. What are teams doing right now? Where are they going right? Where are they going wrong?
Yeah. So, I think the most consistent thing that teams are doing is investing in participation, whether it be NFL flag or,
Right.
the youth soccer camps or associated with, the new youth, MLS participation group, MLS Go. And so they're all pushing participation and you see that in a variety of ways. And then from there, you've got teams that invest in different things. Some are oriented around kind of the experience on game day and, providing, family ticket packages. You've got the kids clubs, and you've got those type of activities. You've got, kids oriented activities on the plaza or at, kids specific, tailgates, within the stadium. So you've got activities for kids to do. And so that would be kind of a second bucket. And then a third bucket is around community programming, where, teams are going into schools, either with something from the NFL, like, Play 60 or, their own programs. And so where we fit in with teams today is when they take their own programs into communities, specifically around schools. And so what we did is we took our football activity box and we, shrunk it down to the highlights, such that it could be done as a 30-minute activation with a player, in a first or second grade classroom. And so the first relationship we built was with the Bengals. And then, they took that activation into Cincinnati Public Schools last year. We ended up doing 5 of them together. And then over the summer, they liked what we were doing, as did the business community. And so they sold a corporate sponsorship against our program. And so they've now grown it meaningfully, into this fall. And so, what they like about it is that, it's a structured program that, a player can go into a school. 2, it's a sellable asset and, a revenue center now. And it's an enriching activity that's an on-ramp to football, but not, simply participation based. So if you don't know how to throw a football and you're not super comfortable doing that, like all you have to do is be able to read a little bit, dance, play a beanbag toss game, and you can feel like you've learned a little bit about football and you're getting an on-ramp to the game. And back to the licensing point, we don't have the Bengals mark, obviously, but they bring a player who's, wearing a Bengals jersey, they bring Bengals swag. And so even though, the Future Fans content itself is team agnostic, like it still feels very much
The halo is very
Bengals
much
game
there.
because of all the trappings that they can bring around it. And so for us, it's great because we're providing something of value to them. And for them, it's a program that also still feels like their own. And it's something that's as a part of the community. And so, we're really excited about that. And that will be growing in the NFL, and we're doing similar things in MLS as well, into next year.
Yeah, where does I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but it's related. Trust me. Especially with flag football coming to the Olympics, in not too far along, with the LA Games. I imagine it's USA Football is always interested in creating new fans of the sport and creating new participants of the sport. But even beyond the U.S. now, you have countries all over the world that are trying to get ready for flag football and build up their grassroots programs, and let alone build up people that understand what the hell's going on, on the field. And so, is there that like? I guess, what's your POV for these NGBs, national governing bodies like USA Football? What are they doing to educate fans and young people on the sport, with the rules, let alone outside the states? If you guys have even thought about that.
Yeah, so flag football, just like any other initiative, you've got the like governing body and league perspective, and then you've got the kind of grassroots, be it kind of team at the NFL level or, even the kind of local rec level. And, there's a lot happening at both levels. And by the way, like everything that's happening is great because, boys and girls are getting out, being active and learning about the game.
Yeah.
And so my point of view is that it's great, and it helps get people engaged in the game and active, but it may not necessarily lead to long-term fandom because the game that kids are playing in flag looks a little bit different from the game that you see on TV. I mean, obviously the quality, but the rules
Right.
themselves are different. And so
Yeah.
when we started last fall, we went out and surveyed a bunch of parents whose kids, young kids play flag football, in that entry level first, second grade. And the
Mhm.
majority reported that like their kids don't know downs, right? They don't know the basic rules because they're focused on, the skills and the activities. And oh, by the way, like there are only 3 downs in flag football. And so like to us, like in an ideal situation, and this is purely selfishly, is like, any first or second grader that's starting and getting into flag would also get like our product or a version of it because then they get the skills based, they get in many cases, an NFL team jersey, which, ties them to a team,
Yeah.
but then they also get more of the kind of learning based, which prepares them to be a fan, of the game that they see in the stadium or on TV.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to think about this intersection because I love like hearing about the school visits with the Bengals and those programs and drive and where the intersection here is between participation and fandom. And your guys' company is called Future Fans, and you guys are thinking you're developing fans. And if someone also wants to participate and play, that's great. They will know how to do so. And so, is that really an intentional thing when you guys think about future fans? That yes, I mean, especially if you are, not everyone is even capable. I'm sitting here. I'm 5'6", a buck 60. In my wildest dreams, I can never play in the NFL, or any sort of high level tackle football. And so it's not for everybody. So are you really? Is that what the vision is? Is like someone that goes through future fans? The goal is not necessarily to make them want to be the next Tyreek Hill or be the next Joe Burrow, but that they just want to get to the point where they like, I guess, what is that? What do you want the kid to feel when they come out of your program, and whether how that affects their dreams going forward? And maybe that's a little bit grandiose.
Yeah, no, but it's a good question because we think about that every day. As you said, our company is called Future Fans. And so we're oriented around helping young kids become fans of the game. And again, by unlocking and understanding, you create the setting for long-term fandom. Now, with that said, as we've done research on our customers, we've talked to families and parents who've said, my kid, went through the football box with me, and that also sparked an interest in playing flag football in a way that child never had that interest before. So we definitely think that there's a secondary and related benefit of encouraging participation because, as you think about it, it makes sense. Now you know more about what's going on. Now you're engaged in asking questions and, enjoying this with your parents, with your friends. Some subset of those kids who, enjoy being active and playing sports are then going to want to opt in and play the game. And so, that's definitely a component there, and something that we're excited about because there's a lot of research out there that shows the value to young kids of being active and playing sports, and so that's great too.
Hell yeah. Love hearing that. Just being real, love here with Michael Gold, co-founder of Future Fans. I really enjoyed this conversation. This is going directions I never even anticipated. I kind of want to hear just a little about what you think in terms of the consumption of the sport by these future fans and these present fans after they go through the product. Um, I guess maybe not a perfect world, but there is a world where the happy customer is like, oh, now I can watch a game with my kid. And they know what's going on and they get into it, they get engaged with it. We can talk about what's going on. But the standard is conventional wisdom, and certainly I think even myself at times, like you're not going to find too many kids under the age of 10 and maybe under the age of 18 even that will sit down and watch a full game. And they are consuming the sport now through highlights, maybe through bits and snackable pieces, and they're not sitting down watching a 2 or 3 hour game. As good as that Georgia Alabama game was earlier this season, will a 7-year-old sit through all that? So how does that come into play? Like, is the ultimate outcome going to be, well, now they're at least going to want to know what's going on? Maybe they'll check in with you every few minutes or watch highlights on their phone. Like, is the consumption pattern just going to be different so that the future fan is not going to consume and behave like the present fan?
Yeah, it's a great point. Our goal is not to have an 8-year-old, sit in a seat and watch, a football game for 4 hours, right? Like that's not going to happen.
Yeah,
and so what we're all about is exactly as you described, is engagement and connection. And so they don't have to watch the whole game, right? They watch part of the games, they read about the game, they watch videos. It's about engagement. And I just want to give you a quick anecdote because this is like one of my favorite things that's happened to me this fall. So as I mentioned at the outset, I went to Michigan. We're raising two, Wolverines here in Columbus. Mm-hmm. And it was, during the Michigan Minnesota game, I was at a family wedding and the game was going on. My 13-year-old daughter was not at the wedding, but she knew I was there and she calls me. And so I immediately text her and I say, hey, Gemma, like literally the wedding is going on. Is it an emergency? And she said, yeah, it's an emergency. Michigan just blocked a punt and we've got to talk about it. It's amazing. and so, right, she ended up, watching the first half of that game, right? We were up big, Minnesota ended up coming back, but we still won. And she didn't watch the second half. She went and hung out with friends. And again, that's okay. Like we had something to talk about when I got home from the wedding. We had something to talk about on Sunday. We got to look ahead and talk about, the national championship rematch at Washington for the next weekend as I was taking her to school that Monday morning. So that's what it's about. It's about having something to connect with. Sometimes that means watching it together. Sometimes it means watching highlights together. And sometimes it just means talking about it. And she's conversant enough in what's going on that we can have that connection. And whatever else is going on in her world, we can always go back to that. And Neil, that is priceless. And I cannot emphasize that enough.
No, hell yeah. Like I said, it's the same thing with my parents and to be able to sit through. And actually, I'll throw an anecdote to you because I know that my mom, who never I came from hockey. I came up working. My career started with the Anaheim Ducks and working in hockey. My mom had never probably even been to an ice hockey game in her life. And by the time I was through with my tenure there, and still to this day, she knows everything about it. She'd text me during every game, unless she's recording it. She records live sports, which is insane to me. But she knows everything about it now. And so the opportunity to connect really is powerful there in learning that. And it happens at any age. So I don't expect, the majority of your clientele to be, the 40, 50-year-old women who are trying to learn the game, but maybe they could through that as well. So I use that as kind of an entry point to the next question as well. As we come down the wire with this interview, heck, there are plenty of things that I don't know about the sport of football. When it comes to learning, and even the podcast I listen to, they're learning about the different schemes and on defenses, learning about different play calls, learning about different formations, and as the sport continues to evolve, is there? I'm sure this is well outside of what you guys are problems you're trying to solve, but is there an opportunity, a niche there where there's an opportunity to have that sort of continued education on what comes next after future fans? Is there an opportunity for the 12-year-old to be like, oh yeah, I already know what downs are, of course, but I don't know what a 3-3-5 is, whatever, in some of these formations, let alone myself. I don't expect you guys to build a product like this, but is there an opportunity there for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal with the first product is to get a young kid with a baseline understanding, such that they then know how to ask questions and how to engage. And oh, by the way, like the sports fan parent in the household can answer, 80% of the questions that anybody has. But there
Yeah.
definitely is an opportunity, and it's more likely on the digital side to then get to that next level where you've got much more technical detail for, the super fan, where like you're reading about on your fan blogs that go way deep into schemes and so on, and you can go as far as you want there.
But I mean, I guess for the future fan graduate, like for them to continue learning or continue learning the nuances of the sport, like they're going to do that on their own. They're going to find resources. They're going to go on YouTube. Maybe they'll pick it up and start to teach their parents a little bit more beyond the basics. But it's an interesting thing about that sort of kind of gap in knowledge of, okay, now I know the basics of what's going on, but what's going on there now? Like what are they doing
Yeah.
here? I mean,
Well, and
especially
I'll say,
yeah,
for us, there's nothing like what we do out in the market today, in terms of this parallel approach that, takes the best from early childhood education to teach young kids the core concept of the sport. You can, Google what a 3-3-5 is, or some other formation in
true.
soccer that I also don't know about, and get some of those details on coaching sites or whatever else. Now, is there a way to package it better, for a young teenager? Absolutely. But I think the burning problem is the one that we're solving here today.
And a couple more quick questions here. I can keep peppering you all day, as you know, Michael, from our previous conversations. Right now, the NFL in particular. I mean, I think soccer we can outside of the small kids, of course. Like soccer's a pretty global sport. NFL, American football is very different. The NFL is trying constantly to teach people abroad, and they're obviously having games internationally. I don't know how many people at Wembley Stadium know what's going on during the game, but they definitely enjoy the kicking, the field goals more than touchdowns sometimes. So is there an opportunity like how can the NFL take what you guys are doing and help to sort of export that a little bit? Like, is there something where you guys need to come up with a way to engage the 10 to 12-year-olds or the 18 to 25-year-olds? Or is that really where a different problem to solve of teaching the rules in a different way to someone who is not, a 4 to 7-year-old, a 4 to 8-year-old?
Yeah, the NFL is certainly making a big push internationally, starting with the games that they host, and then doing a ton of things around that. And they've allocated specific countries to teams who are now investing in that as well. We think there's a lot that we can offer to NFL International.
Yeah.
They're certainly doing things on their own. We've had some conversations because the a beanbag toss game is not cultural specific to the United States,
Totally. Yeah.
and something that you could create a short video around, be it with a foreign player or some type of famous person or just a normal
Right.
mom or dad, and something like that, along with some other things that we have in mind, could go a long way to helping to educate the audience at a real basic level. And by the way, like that could probably educate an 8-year-old and could educate a 35-year-old. And,
Right.
I watch 3-minute videos on YouTube all the time to help, learn things. And so there's no
Yeah.
reason that can't be, applied across age groups so long as they have an interest in learning.
Yeah, and those young kids abroad are the kids that the NFL wants to reach anyway. I mean, that's those they're more receptive. They haven't picked their favorite sports yet, or even learned their favorite sports yet. And so certainly, I mean, that's one where the NFL should be acting with urgency if they want to continue
Yeah.
to
And I
export
think,
sport.
the existing paths to that are least well suited for the NFL, right? Because the participation path, that's a long, haul that you have to like, get a whole like flag football infrastructure set up
Right.
in, Austria or Ghana or whatever. Like, that's hard. But so to me, this education path where you're teaching in parallel ways that kids can understand is really well suited for international, but we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, and frankly, I'm sure you have more and more kids out there of all ages who are trying to figure out what's going on in American football because they know that Taylor Swift's into it. I mean, I'm not even joking. Like
Yeah.
and the Super Bowl is a very big global event that everyone knows is happening,
Yep.
but not everyone necessarily knows what's happening on the field at
Yeah.
times.
And Taylor Swift is a great spark, for the interest in football. What does that longer term relationship and engagement look like? We'd love to be the long-term engagement that starts with a Taylor Swift spark.
Hell yeah. Last one I want to pick your brain about, Michael. First, this will shareable stat, which will come up shortly. I want to put my marketing hat on a little bit here. I mean, marketing hat is always on. But I want to hear about like what you guys have done. I know you and I've talked about like finding these true partners that feel more like ambassadors, that understand your mission and are oftentimes are hands-on with it with their own kids. So like, what goes into trying to find these ambassadors, working with them, educating them, and making sure they are the right people to partner with, and whether that's athletes or non-athletes?
Yeah, so I'm sure like many other brands, the most important thing is fit to our mission and what we're trying to do. So we're always looking around for people that are passionate about sports, have young kids, and really are thinking about that next generation. Whether that's a player, a former coach, somebody in the media, or just a parent. And so, one place that we've spent a lot of time this football season is advertising on sports podcasts. And we've been really intentional about partnering with hosts who, are really aligned to the mission in the way that I just described. And so we'll try to get them products and oftentimes they'll go through the product with their kids. And so that helps us a couple ways. One, like they're speaking really authentically about our brand, to their podcast audiences. In some cases, they'll bring their own, young kids onto the podcast for a segment to talk about it, to talk about sports. Laura Rutledge does a really nice, where she has her kids pick from time to time with the helmets and like. We've got that at a much, much smaller scale where, you've got podcast hosts bringing their kids on who have learned the sport because our, box helped them. And then they're showing all the ways that that's created connection and fun in their lives. So, that's a place where we've focused more of our time. We've certainly, engaged with any number of NFL and former NFL players who have young kids. As a startup, we don't have the dollars to throw out to bring these people on in the traditional means, but we're getting down the path to hopefully work with some folks that really believe in what we're doing. And we'll see where that goes.
I mean, every parent probably goes through the process of where like, I wish my kid has no idea what I do. I mean, I had a rough idea what my dad did growing up, but I couldn't tell you the details. So I imagine every NFL player, every college football player that with a kid, they would love the opportunity to educate their kids on what the hell it is they do every day.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially former players that have daughters, it's a really nice connection point because this is less about, I mean, there are plenty of girls that play flag football, but especially at a younger age, we found that, dads and daughters, this is a great connection.
Oh yeah. What are the metrics that you guys pay attention to when it comes to selecting an ambassador and a podcast? And this is a little bit of me just like kind of wanting to learn here from your guys' experience. Like what are the metrics that are out there? Average listenership, average conversion rate, retention during a given episode. What are you learning about the space overall, in terms of what matters, as well as when it comes to looking at potential athletes to partner with, or potential podcasters? You look at their social following, what platforms they're prevalent on, what their demographics are like. Give me a little bit of a 101 here.
First and foremost is, can they be an authentic salesperson for us? And so that, means the things that I described about actually going through the product and speaking authentically about it, and then being willing to do a live read versus like a dynamically inserted ad. For purely tactically, live reads are much harder to skip over because they're integrated into the content, and it really lends itself to, much more authentic, kind of off the cuff. And so it doesn't just sound like, we've written something that somebody's reading. That's ultimately our goal. And then from there, we've got some open questions that we're working through. So is like more of a national audience better, or more of a team specific, be it an NFL team or a college team specific. Like thus far, we've had some success and some not so much success in both. And then you got to think about audience size, right? You and I were talking, earlier that there's a hypothesis around a smaller audience size, is more engaged, with that host and that community. But we've seen that actually bigger audiences can do well for us also. And so those are the things that, are at play for us as we as we think about the right strategy. But then you have to overlay the business terms around CPMs and average weekly downloads and unique visitors. But it's a mix of those kind of qualitative elements that we've evaluated, as well as the metrics that help us get to a sustainable customer acquisition cost for us. But feeling cautiously optimistic that going after sports fans in this authentic way where they aggregate is going to be the way that we get the word out in an efficient manner.
Totally. And there's no shortage of sports focused podcasts for you guys to go after. That's for sure.
Yeah. And that's a great thing to have. Right.
No, I appreciate you going through that. All right. I said that was the last question, but I have one more because you're going to indulge me here, Michael, and I appreciate you giving me so much time. You talked about like some of the products that are in development mode, baseball, other sports. What's that process like where, okay, we're going to do this sport. Now what comes next? Like, how do you go about, like, this is the best way to educate? These are the things that we need. These are the basics we need to get through. What's that like?
Yeah, it's mostly art. And so we always start by defining what are the 5 or 10 things that, anybody has to understand about a sport to be conversant in it, right? So, right, in football, that's downs, offense, defense, major positions that touch the ball, scoring, and a few others. And then we, put our 8-year-old brains on and say, okay, what are all the creative games and experiences that we can come up with that would take place at a summer camp, where we can embed the rules. And it has to be something where we want to isolate one gamer experience for one rule. We don't want to bring too many things together at once, right? And so, we've got to figure out how to isolate that one rule. And then we've got to figure out how can this be fun and interesting for a kid. And then the third piece to layer on is, what's the surprise, the product that goes in the box along with the book, that we can productize in a like cost and space efficient way that it'll fit in the box. And so, we go through a lot of ideas. We prototype a lot of different products. We play with them. Every kid in my neighborhood, every kid in my co-founder's neighborhood, we've borrowed to test these products out. And then we not only we test them out, are they fun and do they teach? So like when we were developing the way to teach downs, like, we would have kids play that beanbag toss game, and then we would show them a clip, conveniently like a Bengals Chiefs clip where the Bengals were winning, and see, did they retain what we learned and could they translate that to learning? And so it was like this, we'll call it an inductive approach, but just a mishmash of trying to put it together. We've now codified it as we're now onto our 3rd, 4th, and 5th product. And then we've layered in some expertise. We have, some teachers, we have a New York City-based children's book team, that bring best practices, to help take our kind of creative approach and make sure it's also on track.
Very cool. No, I enjoyed hearing that, going through that. And this kind of stuff will keep you young for sure, because you have to always be able to tap into that. What's the 5-year-old inside me thinking right now? And then, working with the kids as well and sort of the focus group style stuff, and just really fun. And I'm sure having that IP or having that sort of umbrella of summer camp and some of the characters introduced, like that helps, ground things as well going forward. So it's really, really cool to hear about the process. All right, Michael, we're going to have some more fun with you in our next segment with the quick hitting questions. But first episode's shareable stat coming up right now. Really good stuff, being able to pick the brain of Michael Gold, co-founder of Future Fans. Again, really interesting company. Just love the conversation. We think all the time about how do we cultivate the fans of tomorrow. As we mentioned in the interview, so many league and team executives are being kept up at night about how do they reach those fans, and working with Future Fans is one of those elements now, a key element as I think about trying to create the fans of tomorrow, both at the U.S. as well as abroad, as you may have caught some of the NFL games being played overseas recently. So much opportunity there. But stick around because we're going to have some more fun with Michael in our Quizlets segment. But first episode's shareable stat. And I decided to pull a shareable stat that is very relevant to the conversation today, and the shareable stat is 50%. And that is around 50% of fans sports fans are created before the age of 14. And that's according to a study by Two Circles done in late 2023, so a pretty recent data point. And again, nearly half of fans, sports fans, are created before the age of 14. You've heard other ages cited oftentimes. We think about that 8 to 10-year-old range as being when fans truly find the things they're passionate about. But this is when you can really get those sports fans to fall in love with your sport, fall in love with your team. And you have up until the age of 14. Of course, that's half of fans, so it's not all hope is not lost after they turn 15 or after they reach the age of 14. But just underscores the true importance of reaching fans as early as possible, getting them to adopt your team, your sport, and getting them on that track so that they are a fan for life. There's perhaps no better business or no better industry when it comes to the lifetime value of fans. If you can get a fan, they can truly be a lifetime fan. You talk about the lifetime value with all the engagement, all of the purchases, all the games they'll attend, the merch they will buy and wear. So many opportunities to leverage those fans for value and the value they create for you as well as your sort of voluntary marketing force, and as the case in future fans, passing that fandom on in a hereditary fashion almost to their kids and their friends of their kids. Such important stuff to really think about how you reach those younger fans, to be kept abreast of how younger kids and fans are adopting your sport, learning your sport, engaging with your sport. More and more fans are connected now at a younger age, of course. Not too young or getting their smartphones, but younger than you think, 10, 12, 14, when they first jump on those platforms. So many opportunities to think about how you reach those younger fans, and this shareable stat, and as well as the thesis of future fans and the value prop for them, really underscores the importance there. So that's episode shareable stat. Think about it, talk about it, keep it in the back of your mind. Again, nearly 50%, according to a study by Two Circles, around half of sports fans are created before the age of 14. More important though, stick around for some more fun and insights with Michael Gold of Future Fans. Back on this episode of Shareable Stat, and I'm joined once again by Michael Gold. He is the co-founder of Future Fans. Michael, really enjoy picking your brain and learning so much about what you guys are doing. I want my own Future Fans product right now so I can learn some of these new sports and also just reteach myself the basics. But you kicked ass in your interview. Are you now ready for a few Quizlets?
Let's do it.
I can't guarantee any prize boxes for these questions, but we'll do our best. All right, number one for you. Tell me the first memory you have. I want to tap into your own childhood as a young budding fan. So tell me the first memory you have of going to a pro sports game, and also the first game that you took your kids to that you think they were old enough to actually remember.
Yep. So my first memory was I live in Columbus, grew up here. My grandmother was a huge Cincinnati Reds fan, so we went down to a Reds game for my birthday. Why I remember it is I got to bring a fan, and Paul O'Neill threw a ball that my friend caught, not a fan, my friend, and my grandmother made my friend give the ball to me because it was my birthday.
Oh, hell yeah. That's how you do it. You better have it. And how about as a father, taking your kid to a game? What was that first memory?
Yeah, we'll go with the most memorable one. Took my daughter to the OSU Michigan game last year on the, in Ann Arbor on the road to the national championship win.
Yeah.
So that was like, something that we'll always remember and have together.
So cool. Just ideally, she didn't ask about the previous 5, 6, 7 versions of the game.
Well, I didn't take her in 21, and she was pissed about it for 2 years. So I was, I made up for it by taking her in 23.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, you can teach the kids the sport, but it always helps if the local team is really, really good and winning championships. That's for sure. That's a nice little boost to their fandom, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Number two for you, Michael, tell me the social or digital platform that's most effective for future fans, however you want to take that, and also one that you kind of have your eye on as having high potential for the future.
Yeah, so we're mostly on Instagram, partly because we're a small brand and we've got to invest in a select number of platforms. But it's an opportunity for us to kind of showcase what we're about, and there's enough going on sports on that platform that it's relevant for us, but doesn't move quite as fast as Twitter.
Right. Is there one, like, if we're talking 5 years from now, you're like, if we have all the resources in the world, we would invest in this platform? What would that be?
Yeah, I mean, obviously TikTok has grown a ton. If that stays on the legal side of things, which I imagine it will,
Yeah.
the discoverability of our product and the opportunity to create really cool content over time, like we've got that opportunity, whether it be with athletes and their kids, whether with kid reporters, just all those moments that evoke our brand, where people are celebrating sports as participants and fans. And so excited about, cracking that, in the months and years to come.
Hell yeah. I know I geek out about social opportunities all the time, so we'll continue to do so. Number three, you talked about your background, and even now you have been a founder. You have been in businesses throughout your career. You're now, leading Future Fans. So tell me just the general business principle or like mantra or idea or key thing that has really stuck with you as a through line throughout your career.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing for me is being a good listener. Like it's kind of hackneyed to say that, but especially when we embark on things that are new and like we have to figure new things out every day. Just making sure we're not jumping to conclusions, listening to people around us who know a whole lot more about things than we do, is super important. And then know, when you can stop listening and then you make a decision, and move something ahead. So, try to do the best we can there.
I like that. The old saying of like whatever, God gave you two ears and one mouth. So use that.
There you go.
Number four for you, Michael. Tell me the biggest insight you picked up about children's behavior during the Future Fans journey so far. Like what should we know about kids like behavior or mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think like if you know how to engage kids, right, like it can be so easy and so fun, but it's just as easy to do it in the wrong way. And I was doing it the wrong way. My business partner was doing it in the wrong way for a long time, and we got nowhere. And then just by stepping back, and yeah, we put a fair amount of time into coming up with the right way, but that can really make a difference. And so I always constantly think like, how can we be doing things better and differently? We're never going to change the way that kids behave or the way kids learn. So it's all about us, coming up with the best ways we can.
Yeah, adapt to them. Don't make them try to adapt to your boring ways of learning things necessarily as you grow up and get older. Next question for you. This is gonna be a fun one. Your dream partnership with an active athlete. Excluding anyone that you've had contact with. I don't want to burn any bridges necessarily. But someone you have not spoken to about Future Fans that would be your dream active athlete partnership. Speak into existence. This is your chance.
Oh, that is, that's a tough one. But Patrick Mahomes comes to mind, right? He's obviously top of the world today. He's got young kids; they're just coming into the age range. The Chiefs, obviously, at the top of the cultural kind of perspective based on the fact that they've won two, that Taylor Swift is associated. And my business partner is going to cringe when he hears this because he's a huge Bengals fan, but that's who came to mind first.
There we go. Get Patrick, get Brittany, get the whole crew together, get their kids on Future Fans. And I mean, heck, he may be a customer before he's an ambassador. Right? He might end up in your purchase list on your database before you know it. So there we go. All right, number six for you. This is gonna be a fun one. I want you, whether you put your kid hat on or just your sports fan hat on, tell me your favorite sports movie of all time. I like this question.
Favorite sports movie is Days with Thunder. Days of Thunder is absolutely, I'm not a huge NASCAR fan, but it is just like Cole Trickle is the best name of any character of any sports movie. And it's a movie that I've watched with my kids and they've loved it. And there you go.
Hell yeah, I like that one. I think is Tom Cruise going to bring it back and make a sequel? Like it feels like everyone else has a sequel.
Yeah, who knows? But I definitely watch it.
Number seven. This is going to be another putting your kid hat on. I mean, these are fun questions to come up with the content of our interview today. So tell me your favorite TV show or cartoon growing up, and the show that your kids watched that you most liked. So what was one that you didn't mind watching with the kids? So one growing up and one as a father.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched He-Man growing up, and saving all the the little things you had to collect to get the figurines in the mail. It's a great way to connect the digital and the physical. We think about that all the time. It's funny, my kids love Disney movies, and with Disney Plus these days, like they just like go through the catalog over and over again. So we're sitting at home, watching and singing to Moana and Encanto, and it's another great way to connect with your kids, right? I love sports. I'm building a whole business around it, but it's certainly not the only way to connect with your kids.
No, totally. I mean, I know any parent that I've spoken to, it seems like the general behavior for kids is they find a movie they like and then you watch it like 85 times.
That's right.
Oh, fun stuff. All right, time for our food question, Michael. Always gotta ask a food question. We love it. Tell me if I come out there to Columbus and hang out with you, the best meal to get in Columbus and where to get it. Where are we getting?
Yeah, we're gonna go to Lan Viet and get some Vietnamese food. And we're gonna get some chicken pho soup. We're gonna get some, banh mi sandwiches, and it's gonna be a really good day.
Hell yeah, I will take you up on that. Vietnamese food in Columbus. Who would have thought? I like it. All right, number 9 for you coming down the wire here with Michael Gold of Future Fans. This is an open-ended question. You can take it wherever you want to. Where does or where could generative AI fit in for the present and future of Future Fans? There's so many avenues where Gen AI is affecting things or could affect things. Where have you thought about it for either, again, the present or maybe it's just distant future?
Yeah, so for us, like many other businesses, we're using it, in the background to help, accelerate some of the things that we, need to do today, around, writing marketing copy and, doing other sorts of things and helping to automate, audience segmentation and others. To be honest, I haven't thought about it too much in terms of the consumer facing product for the future. We're a bit of a throwback today, but I'm sure there are, any number of ways, that if we sat back and thought a bit, we could come up with.
Yeah, I mean, my wheels are always turning, so you and I can continue to geek out on this stuff together as it continues to evolve. All right, last one for you. Sherrone Moore, new coach in Michigan. Obviously Jim Harbaugh left you guys after some good and feeling pretty good. So tell me, what is the over under you're setting for national championships won by Sherrone Moore?
That's a tough one. Winning national championship is so hard. I think he's got one in him. I think it's going to take a few years. They've got to build back up. But he's a great coach. He showed that last year when he had to step in, for Harbaugh, and won some really big games. And so if he can keep recruiting O linemen, tight ends, and running backs, and linebackers, I think we'll get one more out of him.
Hell yeah. I mean, at the very least, you all should be in the playoffs most seasons. So you want to get on a hot streak? Who knows?
Yeah, I love the 12-team playoff. I'm super excited to see it this year. The season already feels different, because you can lose a game and not feel like you're completely out of it. So,
Yeah.
Kudos to all the college football fans out there.
Hell yeah, love it. All right, you kicked ass in your Quizlets. You deserve all the prizes. Now your chance. You take over the podcast, Michael. Tell us your social media all-star fall. It doesn't have to be a social media person, but it can. Just tell us what platform they're on. It could be a newsletter, a podcast, a Twitter follow, an Instagram follow, whatever it is. Just tell us who they are and why you think we should follow them.
Yeah, so this is outside sports, just the first person that came to mind. There's a guy, Nick Sharma, who is like an absolute guru on all things direct to consumer. This is my first direct to consumer business, so every week I learn a ton from him, and so he's got a lot of great free content out there, in a newsletter and in a podcast, and he hosts live events and a whole bunch of other things. And so, that's the first thing that came to mind that helps me out every week.
No, totally. That's a good one. It's someone I've come across quite a bit as well over the years. So good recommendation for sure. And how about you? Where can we find you as well as all things Future Fans across digital social?
Yeah, at Future Fans Sports, Instagram, TikTok, X, Twitter, and Facebook. And we're at futurefans.com on our website.
Hell yeah. Check them out. Just to see what they're doing. They're helping to create the fans of tomorrow, the future fans. Really enjoy be able to pick your brain today, learn about all the things you guys are doing, and really, I think, inspiring and also grateful to you for helping ensure that we will have plenty of fans that know what's going on in the future.
Well, that's certainly our mission. I love, following along with your content and super excited to have been here today.
Hell yeah. Thanks so much again to Michael Gold, co-founder of Future Fans. Really enjoyed speaking with him today, following the business, learning from him, all the experiences that he gets from working with the fans of tomorrow, developing these products to help educate those fans of tomorrow, working with the leagues and teams, seeing how they're trying to educate and reach those fans of tomorrow and partnering with them in many ways. Really cool stuff being able to talk to Michael. And again, check out futurefans.com, see what they're doing, follow along as they continue to grow. And if you have a young kid in your life, buy them a Future Fans product, because it's effective, and you will give them an opportunity to watch the game, or at least talk about the game, whatever it might be, engage with their sport and their team alongside their parents, friends, and you as well. But that'll do it for this episode of the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast. Thanks again for listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz. Hit me up on Twitter, NJ287. Also on LinkedIn, the website, dsmsports.net. Also check out Slyke, SLYKE.co. And stick around for the future episodes. We have a tremendous episode coming up for you, the next episode. Lots of good stuff. Check out the archive. But thanks again for listening. As always, I'm your host, Neil Horwitz, for the Digital and Social Media Sports Podcast.